With summer coming to a close and fall approaching, it is the perfect time to watch horror films, and one of the most influential horror films of all time is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, made in 1974 and directed by Tobe Hooper. This film is not only extremely controversial for many reasons, but also very debatable on whether or not it was the first film in the slasher subgenre of horror. But before we confirm that or not, we should explain the four main candidates for the first slasher movie. Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, and Halloween are the four main candidates for the first slasher movie. Dissecting each film one by one, Psycho is a horror film directed by Alfred Hitchcock in 1960. The film, although having some slasher elements, isn't really a slasher movie, as it is missing certain other elements that would make it a slasher movie. Black Christmas, directed by Bob Clark in 1974, is a Canadian slasher movie, and by many is considered the first slasher film. Halloween was directed by John Carpenter in 1978, and many people consider this to be the first slasher movie, as any slasher elements that were not in Black Christmas are there in Halloween. And then there is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is very complicated. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a lot different than most slasher movies, as it is a very psychological film, whereas most slashers just aren't. The gore is surprisingly very tame, and there are only a few deaths, only 5 in total, whereas most slasher movies it is very common to go way over that. This film also has a completely different viewing experience than any other slasher film. Take any Friday the 13th film, for example. Those films are very fun to watch, not scary, and I didn't feel sorry for anybody who got killed. Whereas with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was completely different when I first watched it. I was yelling at the screen when anybody walked into the Sawyer house or saw any of the Sawyers. The film was terrifying to watch, and it disturbed me for days. It was disgusting. I saw stuff in that film that I have never and will never see in any other horror film again. Cannibalism plays a pretty big part in this film as well, and is one of the only horror films that does, just adding to that disgusting aspect of it, and it has beautiful cinematography, which is a great thing to have in a film like this. The film is very unique, which is why I love it. When I called the film disgusting and terrifying, I meant it in a good way. It's just different, and does what other horror films, specifically slasher movies, haven't and can't do. I love the slasher subgenre. In fact, it's my favorite subgenre of my favorite genre, horror. But I honestly think that it is a disservice to put the Texas Chainsaw Massacre into the slasher subgenre. Complication is a thing hated by many people, me included, but I love that this film is complicated. It's hard to classify this film, but complication isn't always a bad thing. So in my opinion, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't a slasher movie, but sure did inspire the hell out of all the other ones. Meaning that I'm gonna give it to Black Christmas for being the first slasher movie. It has plenty of gore and first-person POV shots. Bob Clark and A. Roy Moore were able to make horror and Christmas pair together perfectly and create a completely new subgenre. But maybe if you aren't in the mood for horror and Christmas, give Chainsaws and Flaming Hot Texas a chance and indulge in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.